your body is running on the wrong fuel. And the people who figured out the right one did it over 1,000 years ago, crossing the most brutal trade route on Earth, with nothing but a saddlebag and a clay pot. There is a 1,600-year-old Daoist text with over 70 dietary formulas, each one engineered to keep the human body from breaking down under extreme conditions. The merchants who carried these meals across the Silk Road lived longer and recovered faster than anyone around them. 10 meals, each one targeting a different system in the body. Stay with me through the entire list, because the first one comes from the oldest Daoist survival manual ever found, and it claims to double your energy in 100 days. The Silk Road was not a road. It was a 4,000-mile gauntlet of deserts, mountain passes and river crossings that killed men through exhaustion and organ failure long before any bandit got the chance. The merchants who survived did not do so by accident. They carried food systems built by Daoist herbalists who had spent centuries learning what the human body needed to keep moving when everything around it was trying to shut it down. The text behind these meals, the Lingbao Wufuxu, reads more like a pharmaceutical manual than a cookbook. Specific ingredients, specific preparation, specific timelines for results. The ingredients inside it now drive a global market worth over $86 billion. The ancient world was not guessing. It was designed. Here are the 10 meals that prove it. Let's start with the simplest one, because simple does not mean weak. You are 3 days out of Chang'an. Your camel is loaded. Your water skin is full. Tucked into your saddlebag is a small cloth pouch of dried red dates and persimmons. No fire needed, no water, no preparation. You reach in, grab a handful, and keep walking. That is meal 10. Red dates, known as jujube, were the most common survival food on the Silk Road. A single handful delivered fast glucose for energy, iron for blood, potassium for muscles, and vitamin C to keep the immune system from collapsing. The natural sugar refueled the body quickly. The fibre slowed the absorption, so there was no crash an hour later. That balance is not an accident. It is the result of centuries of observation. In Daoist medicine, jujube was a blood-nourishing food. It calmed the spirit, supported digestion, and strengthened the heart. The red colour mattered too. In the 5-element system of Daoist cosmology, red connects to the heart and the element of fire. Every food served a physical function and an energetic one at the same time. Dried persimmons added a second layer. Air-dried until a natural white sugar coating formed on the outside, they delivered vitamin A, manganese, and antioxidants. Together, the two fruits covered energy, immunity, blood health, and nervous system stability. In a pouch that weighed almost nothing. Here is what most people miss. The goji berry market is projected to exceed $2 billion by 2030. Jujube shares many of the same properties, has a longer documented history, and remains almost entirely unknown in the Western market. The Silk Road's most common survival fruit is still waiting to be found by the people who need it most. The merchants carrying these dates were not eating a snack. They were running a nutritional protocol refined over centuries for exactly the conditions they faced. When you are crossing a desert, the best meal is the one that asks nothing of you except the decision to eat it. The dates kept the blood fed and the spirit steady. But after days on the trail, the body needed something warm, something that could rebuild from the inside, and that required a different kind of engineering. Here is a question worth sitting with. How do you feed thousands of people across a route with no refrigeration, no supply chain, and temperature swings of 40 degrees between day and night? The answer was not complicated, it was physics. Remove the water from food and bacteria cannot grow. Add the water back and the food is restored. That principle, applied to rice and porridge, created the world's first instant meal system, operating over 1,000 years before anyone put noodles in a cup. The scorched rice method worked like this. Cook rice in a clay pot until a hard golden crust forms on the bottom. Peel it off, dry it in the sun, pack it. It weighs almost nothing and does not spoil. When you need to eat, drop it into boiling water. It rehydrates into a warm, filling meal in minutes. The scorching also made the rice easier to digest, which mattered when your gut was under stress from weeks of rough travel and questionable water. Porridge bricks took the same idea further. Grain porridge was cooked down thick, compressed into dense bricks, and dried solid. A traveller could carry 10 days of meals in a pouch the size of a lunchbox. Break off a piece, add hot water, done. A caravan leader planning a 30-day desert crossing had to calculate calories, weight and shelf life for every person and animal in the group. The porridge brick system solved all three at once. Maximum calories per gram, zero spoilage, instant preparation. That is logistics engineering done with a pot and a fire. Modern survival food companies charge premium prices for freeze-dried meals and compressed energy bars. The engineering behind every one of them is identical to what Silk Road merchants were doing over 1,000 years ago. Only the packaging changed. Porridge bricks kept the body fueled through the long, empty stretches. But fuel alone does not protect you from cold, infection, or the slow breakdown that comes from months without fresh food. For that, the merchants carried something that grew on every mountain they passed, cost nothing, and contained more vitamin C than the citrus fruits European sailors would spend centuries desperately searching for. Pine trees stay green through winter. Every other tree goes bare. The branches drop, the leaves die, but the pine holds. For Daoist practitioners, that was not just a botanical fact, it was evidence. Whatever kept the pine alive through the harshest months contained something the human body could use. That instinct turned out to be chemically correct. Pine needles carry vitamin C at levels significantly higher than citrus fruits, along with vitamin A and a dense load of antioxidants. For a traveller crossing high mountain passes where fresh food was gone for months, pine needle tea was the difference between a working immune system and the slow collapse that scurvy produces. Bleeding gums, weakening joints, fatigue so deep it feels like something more than tiredness. The preparation was simple. Forage the long round needles from the right species, avoiding poisonous lookalikes like you. Steep them in warm water. The result is a citrus-toned, woodsy tea that Daoist hermits and Silk Road travellers drank every single day. Not occasionally, daily. The same way someone today takes a vitamin C supplement each morning. Except this one grew outside the door and cost nothing. European sailors lost over 2 million men to scurvy in the centuries that followed the Silk Road's peak. The British Navy spent decades and enormous resources searching for a cure. Daoist mountain hermits had been drinking it every morning, brewed from the tree outside their door, long before European sailors ever left port. The cure was never lost. It was just never asked for by the people who needed it most. Beyond vitamin C, the anti-inflammatory compounds in pine needles supported the lungs during mountain crossings, where thin air and cold put the respiratory system under constant pressure. A cup of pine needle tea at altitude was not a comfort ritual. It was maintenance. Pine needles protected the body from the outside in, but the Daoists were after something deeper than not getting sick. They wanted to rebuild the body's internal energy from the ground up, and for that, they turned to something growing in the dark, on the sides of dead trees, deep in the forest. The Daoist alchemist Gehong wrote in the Baopuzi that mushrooms had higher value for longevity than common pharmaceuticals. That was not a casual opinion. Gehong was one of the most precise scientific minds of the 4th century AD. He documented chemical processes, tested compounds and recorded outcomes with unusual rigour for his era. When he ranked mushrooms above medicine, he was reporting an observation. The tradition centred on 3 primary fungi, reishi, lion's mane, and Porreokokos. Each one targeted a different system. Together, they formed a broth that addressed immunity, cognition, and energy at the same time. Lion's mane contains compounds called hericinones and erinacines. These are now in active clinical research because they stimulate nerve growth factor, a protein essential for the growth and survival of neurons. The brain needs nerve growth factor to repair itself form new connections and slow the cognitive decline that comes with age. A Daoist monk simmering lion's mane in a clay pot was, without the vocabulary to describe it, running a neuro-regenerative protocol. The global medicinal mushroom market was valued at $9.33 billion in 2024 and is projected to reach $29.9 billion by 2034. Reishi works differently. It is an immunomodulator. It does not simply boost the immune system, it regulates it, dialing the response up under threat and pulling it back when the immune system overreacts. That overreaction is the mechanism behind most chronic inflammatory conditions. Porridge rounds out the broth with polysaccharides that support spleen function and move fluids through the body, addressing the internal sluggishness that Daoist medicine linked to fatigue and poor digestion. The preparation was deliberate. These mushrooms were slow simmered with ginger and garlic for hours. The long cooking time was not about flavour. The tough cell walls of fungi do not break down easily. Extended heat was required to release the medicinal compounds into the liquid. The Daoists did not have the word bioavailability, but they understood the principle: cook it slow, or the medicine stays locked inside. A $29.9 billion global industry is now being built around the same fungi Daoist alchemists were simmering in clay pots 1,500 years ago. The compounds have not changed. The science has simply caught up. Mushrooms fed the brain and the immune system. But long-term survival on the road required something else: deep nourishment of the kidneys, the liver, and the blood. For that, the Daoists turned to two of the most common ingredients in their entire pharmacopoeia, ground together into a paste that monks ate every morning before dawn. Black sesame seeds appear in more Daoist longevity recipes than almost any other ingredient. When a tradition returns to the same ingredient across dozens of formulas spanning centuries, that is not coincidence. That is accumulated evidence. Black sesame is rich in sesamin, a compound with documented antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties. It contains omega oils that support brain function and lubricate the joints. In TCM, it nourishes the liver and kidneys, the two organs most tied to long-term vitality and recovery from sustained physical stress. For a Silk Road traveller sleeping on frozen ground and walking 20 miles a day, joint lubrication and kidney support were not abstract health goals. They were the difference between continuing the journey and stopping. Asparagus root, called tianmendong, was paired with sesame for a specific reason. The Daoist text described it as a way to soak up the light of the sun, to nourish internal qi. More practically, it cleared heat from the lungs and upper body and addressed what the text called the 5 weaknesses, a broad category covering fatigue, respiratory difficulty, and systemic depletion. Where sesame warmed and strengthened, asparagus root cooled and moistened. The two ingredients covered both sides of the body's energy equation in one preparation. Toasted black sesame seeds were ground with dried asparagus root and raw honey into a thick, dark paste. No cooking needed after preparation, no refrigeration required. A traveller carried it in a sealed clay jar and ate a spoonful each morning before loading the camels. High calorie, dense nutrition, a slow, steady burn that lasted through the morning's work. Modern wellness brands sell black sesame oil, asparagus root extract, and raw honey as 3 separate premium products. The Daoists combined all 3 into one preparation, understood the relationship between them, and carried it across a continent in a jar small enough to fit in a coat pocket. The paste worked quietly, rebuilding from the inside over weeks. But sometimes the body needed something faster, something that could restore energy and fight illness at the same time. For that, the Daoists had a soup that emperors and monks valued equally. Ginseng was one of the most valuable goods on the Silk Road, not one of the most valuable foods. One of the most valuable goods, full stop. It moved alongside silk, jade and spices and commanded serious prices across Central Asia and into Persia. The reason was not reputation. It was results. In TCM, ginseng is a yang tonic. It restores the body's active outward energy, the internal fire that drives movement, digestion, mental clarity, and physical endurance. For a merchant who had been walking for weeks through desert heat or mountain cold, that fire was exactly what was running low. But ginseng alone creates a problem. Yang energy without yin balance produces heat, dryness, and agitation. A body pushed hard with ginseng and nothing to counterbalance it runs like an engine with no coolant. The Daoists understood this, so they paired ginseng with snow fungus, called tremella, as the yin counterpart. Snow fungus, rehydrated and simmered slowly, produces a velvety, almost gelatinous texture. It hydrated the body from the inside, supported the lungs, and eased the dry coughs that came from weeks of breathing desert dust or thin mountain air. Red dates and lotus seeds were added to nourish the blood and calm the nervous system. The result was a soup that boosted energy while easing respiratory stress, supporting immunity, and hydrating the body at the same time. This was not a daily meal, it was a recovery protocol. You ate it when you were sick, exhausted, or depleted after weeks of hard travel. A merchant arriving at a caravanserai after crossing the Gobi would seek out this soup the way a modern endurance athlete seeks an IV drip after a race. Warm, soft, and designed to pull you back from the edge. Modern recovery drinks are built with electrolytes, amino acids, and glucose. This soup delivered all three through whole food, plus immunomodulatory compounds from the tremella that no sports drink on the market currently contains. The soup restored the body in a single sitting, but the next item on this list was not just a meal. It was a currency, a water purifier, and a cognitive tool compressed into a single brick. And it became the most traded commodity on the entire Silk Road. Tea is the most underestimated item on this list, not because of what it contains, but because of what it actually was. On the Silk Road, tea was not a beverage. It was a compressed brick of dried leaves that served as food, water purification, and legal tender simultaneously. A single brick could be shaved, boiled, and mixed with flour, salt, or butter to create a full meal. It could purify contaminated water at a caravanserai. And if you ran out of silver, you could trade the brick itself for lodging or supplies. No other substance in the history of trade has served as sustenance, medicine, and currency at the same time. Compressing tea into bricks was an engineering decision. Loose leaves are fragile and bulky. Compressed into dense hard bricks, tea became nearly indestructible. It survived desert heat, mountain cold, and months of rough handling without losing its core properties. Maximum utility, minimum weight, indefinite shelf life. The chemistry inside the brick was doing several things at once. Caffeine provided mental focus during long monotonous stretches where mental fatigue was as dangerous as physical exhaustion. The tannins neutralized pathogens in the water along the route. Boiling water killed most bacteria. The tannins handled much of what survived. A cup of tea from a Silk Road brick was a two-stage water purification system in a clay bowl. In Tibet and Central Asia, tea was mixed with yak butter and salt into a high-calorie drink that delivered fat, caffeine, and minerals in a single cup. That preparation is still consumed daily across the Tibetan plateau today, not as tradition, as function. It has survived because it works in exactly the conditions it was built for. A tea brick the size of a hardcover book could sustain a traveller for weeks. That is not a beverage, that is a survival system with a handle. Tea kept the mind sharp and the water clean, but the road also demanded a reliable protein source that could survive months without refrigeration, align with Daoist principles of non-violence, and weigh almost nothing. A Tang Dynasty prince solved that problem around 164 BC, and the solution is still feeding half the world today. Tofu is believed to have been invented by Liu An, the Prince of Huainan, around 164 BC. The story goes that he was trying to create an immortality elixir by combining soybeans with nigari, a mineral-rich salt solution. What he got instead was a soft, white, protein-dense curd that could be pressed, dried, frozen, or fermented into a dozen different forms. He did not find immortality. He found something more useful, a complete protein source that could survive a desert crossing. For Daoist and Buddhist practitioners who avoided meat, tofu was not a substitute. It was the foundation of their entire protein intake. Fresh tofu could be pressed into firm blocks and dried for transport. It could be frozen in mountain winters and thawed into a spongy texture that held its structure through cooking. It could be fermented in salt and chili oil into what the text called vegetarian cheese, a probiotic-rich shelf-stable cube that lasted an entire trading season without spoiling. That fermented version was particularly valuable on the road. Fermentation increased the bioavailability of the protein, making it easier for the body to absorb. It introduced beneficial bacteria into the gut, supporting the digestive health that long-distance travel consistently disrupted. And it concentrated the flavour enough that a single small cube transformed a bland bowl of rice into a complete, satisfying meal. Daoist cooks also developed techniques to mimic the texture of fish and poultry using tofu, creating mock meats that met the body's need for dense protein while following non-violent dietary principles. This was food engineering driven by philosophy, producing results that modern plant-based protein companies are still trying to replicate with industrial equipment. The modern plant-based protein industry markets itself as the future of food. The core technology behind it was perfected over 2,000 years ago by a prince who was trying to make an immortality potion and accidentally invented something better. Tofu solved the protein problem, but the road demanded something even more fundamental: a carbohydrate source that could survive anything. No moisture, no mold, no spoilage, and the solution required nothing more than a pot, a fire, and an understanding of what heat does to starch. The noodle is one of the most consequential food innovations in human history, and it did not begin in Italy. Noodles became possible in China during the Han Dynasty when large-scale milling technology arrived from the West via the early Silk Road. The ability to grind grain into fine, consistent flour opened a new category of food engineering. Silk Road merchants who needed portable, fast-cooking, shelf-stable carbohydrates drove that category forward with one specific technique: the three-boil method. The chemistry is straightforward. Alkaline salts, harvested from lake beds along the Silk Road route, were dissolved into the water used to make the dough. The alkalinity changed the protein structure of the wheat gluten, making the noodles more elastic, more durable, and more resistant to crumbling during weeks in a saddlebag. The same treatment also increased the bioavailability of certain B vitamins in the wheat, making the noodles more nutritious than plain flour and water. The three-boil method was precise. Bring the water to a boil. Add the dried noodles. When it returns to a boil, add cold water to drop the temperature. Bring it to a third boil. Done. The cold water controls the cooking temperature so the noodles hold their structure instead of turning to mush. That is a thermal engineering technique disguised as a cooking instruction. The result was a dried noodle that could be carried for weeks and rehydrated in minutes. Immediate carbohydrates, immediate warmth, trace minerals from the alkaline salts. For a merchant crossing the Gobi with nothing but a fire and a pot, this was the difference between a hot meal and going hungry. The global instant noodle market is currently worth over $50 billion annually. The core technology behind every packet on every shelf in every country, an alkaline-treated dehydrated noodle that rehydrates in hot water, was perfected on the Silk Road during the Han Dynasty. The chemistry has not changed in nearly 2,000 years. Only the packaging has. Noodles fed the body fast. But the Daoists saved their most powerful recipe for something different. Not speed, not convenience, concentrated compounded energy. A formula designed to rebuild the body's core vitality from the ground up. It comes directly from recipe 20 of the oldest Daoist survival manual ever found. This is where the real engineering lives. The Lingbao Wufuxu was compiled around 400 AD. It contains over 70 dietary and herbal formulas, each specific in its ingredients, preparation, and expected outcomes. Recipe 20 makes a claim precise enough to be tested. Take this compound daily and it will strengthen your qi in 30 days and double it within 100 days. 4 ingredients: Poria cocos, Rehmannia glutinosa, black sesame, asparagus root, each selected for a specific function and each one since studied by modern researchers who arrived at conclusions that align closely with what the text claimed. Poria cocos supports spleen function and moves fluids through the body, reducing the internal sluggishness that Daoist medicine linked to fatigue and poor digestion. Its active polysaccharides are now studied for immune support. Rehmannia nourishes kidney yin and blood, addressing the deep bone-level fatigue that comes from prolonged physical and mental stress. It remains one of the most widely used herbs in TCM for exactly this purpose. Black sesame provides the fats, minerals, and sesamin compounds that support brain function and joint health. Asparagus root clears heat from the lungs and upper body, addressing the respiratory stress that high altitude and desert travel consistently produced. 4 ingredients, 4 systems covered: digestion and fluid movement, blood and kidney restoration, brain and joint support, respiratory health, that is a formulation built by someone who understood the specific physiological demands of long-distance travel in extreme environments. The preparation was engineered for the road. All 4 ingredients were dried and pulverized into fine powders, then mixed with honey or rice wine to form dense portable balls. No fire, no water, no preparation. A traveller could eat one while walking. The entire pharmacy fit in a small pouch. Modern supplement companies sell each of these ingredients separately. Poria capsules, Rehmannia extract, black sesame oil, asparagus root powder. Purchased individually, they represent a significant monthly expense. The Wufuxu combined all 4 into one preparation 1,600 years ago, specified the dosage, and told you exactly how long to take it and what to expect. That is not primitive knowledge. That is integrated knowledge, packaged into something a person could carry in their coat pocket across a continent. Before we close, there is a part of this story that needs to be told directly. Not all Daoist immortality practices were safe when practitioners moved from plant-based dietary refinement to metallic alchemy. The results were catastrophic. The quest for a golden elixir led generations of alchemists to experiment with mercury, arsenic, lead, and cinnabar. The logic seemed sound at the time. If gold does not corrode, consuming gold should make the body incorruptible. The results told a different story. 5 Tang Dynasty emperors died from elixir poisoning in the 9th century AD alone. Emperor Qin Shi Huang, the man who unified China, is alleged to have died from mercury poisoning while searching for the tree of deathlessness. Archaeological evidence from Tang Dynasty burial sites shows mercury concentrations greater than 1 microgram per gram in ancient bones, consistent with chronic alchemical ingestion. The emperors trying hardest to live forever were dying the fastest. The failure of metallic alchemy is precisely why the 10 meals on this list survived. They worked, they were safe. When the golden elixirs started killing emperors, the tradition pivoted back to food as the primary technology for longevity. The mushroom broths, the sesame pastes, the pine needle teas, these survived not because they were ancient, but because they produced results without killing the people who used them. The ones who lived long enough to refine the tradition were the ones who trusted food over metal. Go look at your kitchen. The sesame seeds in your cabinet, the tea in your cupboard, the ginger on your counter. Every one of those ingredients was carried across the most brutal trade route in human history by people who understood something we are only beginning to remember. Food is not just fuel, it is a system. And the people who built that system did it without laboratories or supply chains, using nothing but centuries of direct observation and hard-won knowledge of what keeps a human body moving when everything around it is trying to shut it down. 5 Tang Dynasty emperors died chasing immortality in a metal pill. The monks who outlived them were eating mushroom soup and sesame paste and drinking pine needle tea at dawn. The difference was not magic, it was patience, precision, and a 1,600-year-old text that read more like a field manual than a recipe book. If this is the kind of history that actually matters to you, the kind that connects ancient engineering to the way you live today, subscribe to Silk Road Diaries. Every week, we go deeper into the systems, the survival technology, and the forgotten knowledge that built the ancient world. We are just getting started.